Hey, it's me, Nathaniel Avila, reporting from Texoma, and I'm here with Ruby, reporting from Dallas County. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Ready to get into some history.
History? I think you mean
Mm-hmm.
herstory
No, just history.
on planet Earth.
This is not Doja Cat.
That was a Simpsons joke.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's also Doja Cat's album,
What was it called?
Planet Her.
Planet Her, not Planet
Mm.
Earth.
Her, Her.
Yeah, I know, but the joke was it's Planet Earth because it's Earth, but it's Her.
Oh, I didn't hear you.
Okay.
I didn't hear the TH at the end.
Okay. So, all right, you said you got something for me.
Oh, right. So we are going to lead into the 80s with Mexican Americans. We're going to lead into the 80s, what's going on in the US. But before we get there, there's an important thing that happened in Mexico itself. This was in 1976. So this was something huge that happened because oil reserves were discovered in Mexico in the Bay of Campeche, off the shores of the states of Campeche, Tabasco, and Veracruz, at the southernmost end of the Gulf of Mexico. The Cantarell oil field established there becomes one of the largest in the world, producing more than 1 million barrels per day by 1981. Jose Lopez Portillo, that was elected in 1976, promises to use the oil money to fund a campaign of industrial expansion, social welfare, and high yield agriculture. But to do this, his government borrows huge sums of foreign money at high interest rates, only to discover that the oil is generally of low grade. So these policies leave Mexico with the world's largest foreign debt. So more struggling in Mexico, it seems like, because of the decisions that these leaders are making that are no bueno.
They're no bueno.
No bueno.
They're no taco bueno.
So it's like they were already very poor. Like there's already like a lot of a poor society in Mexico, and now their government, is in debt.
Yeah.
So it does not look good for them.
Yeah, we do live in a society, Ruby. We do live in a society.
We live in a society.
Yep.
So then you can go ahead and lead on with what's going on in the U.S.
Yeah.
around the 80s as well, which I want to say that the 1980s in the U.S., some of the private sectors proclaimed this to be the decade of the Hispanics, bringing with it great expectations and hope. Some believed and forecasted that the Hispanics would develop major political power and rise to new heights in our quest for equal treatment. But the first 4 years of this decade of the 80s do not reflect any of these great expectations. So I think you can go into that.
All right, so let's go into the Reagan era.
So in 1985, Reagan reframed the issue of immigration as one of national security. He said that the U.S. Had lost control of its borders to an invasion of illegal immigrants. Listen to the words that they use. Like, I was just recently talking about how people put their own opinions in the way that they frame statements to create bias. And so if you hear invasion of illegal immigrants, people are going to be like, oh, my goodness, So Congress passed the Immigrant Reform and Control Act in 1986, which led to increased patrols along the U.S.-Mexican border, sanctions on employers of undocumented workers, and an amnesty program for long-term undocumented residents. So more than 2.3 million foreign-born Latino residents in the U.S. took advantage of this program, leading to naturalization and green card status. So it's funny because under Reagan's leadership, Congress had tried to limit Latino immigration, but instead they created incentives that would lead to its increase.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say that was pretty ironic.
Mm-hmm. All right, you ready? So let's talk. Well, like the 1980s was definitely one of the more higher points for the Latin American community.
Yeah, because we had so many people coming over during that time, and like I just read, they naturalized and were issued green card status because
Yep.
of the Reagan policies. So we had the biggest increase in population during that time,
Mm-hmm.
mainly in California.
And we are recording this on Halloween Eve.
Yay, Halloween.
And what is more scarier than talking about history?
Oh my gosh.
The Republicans think that's the scariest thing in the world.
And they think critical race theory is scary.
Oh, critical race theory is scary.
Which, if you think about it, it's really just history.
What's their gripe about it again? Why don't they like it?
I have heard several things. I think one of the things was like, if your parents are doing their jobs at home, then they shouldn't be having to teach it in school and blah, blah, blah. But that's what's like, it's not about that. It's about the fact that this is part of history that you guys are willingly omitting.
That sounds like they're just recycling their thing about sex education again. That's their same argument with that.
Pretty much.
What's
we
the
all
other
know
thing?
how that's been going.
What's the other thing?
Trying to think. Oh, defunding the police. That's super scary to them.
Yeah.
Super scary.
Oh, I meant like what other arguments against critical race theory do they have?
Oh, I can't remember the other ones right now.
Yeah. Because their argument is, for that one, is like it should still be taught, but they don't know who by whom.
By whom?
Yeah. Whether it is the parents or a school official.
Or the school, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, it's history, so I mean, it seems like it would be, logical to teach it in a history class, but this is why we have the whole 360.
The whole 360. All right, so we're going to talk about the 90s. Oh, yeah.
So last time we went over the 80s, and I'll just give like a brief recap of, something that'll bridge the gap between the 80s and the 90s. So we know that there was a 34% increase in the U.S. Hispanic population from 1980 to 1988 due to the heavy immigration, high birth rates, resulting in a young age structure for Latinos with a median age of 25 years versus the U.S. median of 32 years. The U.S. Latinos are a very diverse group, which includes Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, and Central and South Americans, although they tend to be clustered in very few states. Discrimination has plagued the population because of illegal immigration concerns and illegal drug flow problems. And Hispanics continue to suffer from poor educational achievement, language barriers, low-paying jobs, and poverty. Cubans among the Latinos, have made the most progress so far in all of these areas, but poverty is likely to persist into the 1990s, which we will go over. And bilingualism is and will be prevalent as long as immigration continues, but future generations will begin to use English as their first language, which I do see a lot of that now. Example, you, Nate.
What do you mean?
17 states, however, have adopted official language laws in order to decrease the use of funds for Spanish language services. Using Spanish in school is a very divided issue. Some favor bilingual education and some favor the shotgun English approach. As Hispanics grow into workforce age, lack of education will prevent entry into skilled labor. However, some corporations are taking a bigger interest in bilingual workers. And we also see an increase of Hispanics beginning to matter as an electorate. The number of Latino elected officials has doubled from 1974 to 1988. So I'll let Nate go into the 90s so we can talk a little bit more about how Latinos are more prominent in the political aspect of the U.S.
The 90s. Now that's a decade. Way better than that 80s.
Agree to disagree.
Agree to disagree. You only like the 80s because that's the setting of Stranger Things.
That's not the only reason why. I love Stranger Things because it has that 80s, setting. But the 80s has great music, great, clothing. Because I think that in that era, like, people really didn't care. They, wore, they put together so many different kinds of styles, and I love that.
Diseases.
They didn't care.
Major diseases, major discrimination things going on.
But I'm talking about the good things about the 80s.
Okay.
There was also several advances in technology.
The AIDS epidemic was going on.
Cell phone.
But at least Ghostbusters is out.
Invented, yeah. Ghostbusters is out. So many great movies. I mean, come on. All those movies made by that director that died recently. Or not just recently, but a couple years back. What's his name? The one that made 16 Candles and Breakfast Club.
Oh, that's John Hughes.
There you go. So many good things from the 80s. But
it's not,
as in all eras.
The AIDS epidemic is going on, but at least I could listen to David Bowie.
Yeah, there's always going to be bad things in every era, unfortunately. So we'll talk about the bad things that were in the 90s.
I don't think David Bowie was even 80s. I think he was 70s.
I think he still had some releases in the 80s, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the 90s, which wasn't no peach neither. So let's talk about it. So in the final 2 years of the Bush administration, Congress made several important adjustments to U.S. immigration law. So the Immigration Act of 1990 made marrying to evade immigration laws, voting in federal elections as a non-citizen, and falsely claiming citizenship to attain employment criminal violations, which would lead to incarceration and deportation. What do you think of that?
I think that it sucks, both for those who are just trying to come over and make a living for their family, because they really don't have a choice. They're an example of how you are, I guess, pressured or pushed into doing something that you think is okay, because it's going to get you to be able to feed your family, but at the same time, they're enacting these laws that tell you that it is illegal. And it somehow always ends up being against people of color, huh?
Mm-hmm. But the bill also created the temporary protected status and lifted the English testing process for naturalization for permanent residents over 55, and eliminated exclusion of homosexuals as sexual deviants. So it wasn't all bad. Now don't you feel silly now?
No, I stand by what I said, because that's still very true with what I said on the other part.
Okay. So now Bush Sr. is out, and now we're in the era of Slick Willie Clinton. Am I right, Ruby?
Oh my God! Please don't call him Slick Willie.
Why?
It's just, we already know what Clinton was all about.
Mm-hmm. So have you started watching the impeachment show?
I have not. Hopefully I started today,
Okay.
because I really love Beanie. But like I told you before, I had a lot of, bullying, I guess I want to say, or teasing back then when that was all going on, because my first name is Monica, and which is another reason why I don't go by that name. I go by Ruby instead, because I got teased a lot when I was in elementary during that whole scandal, and people will call me Monica Lewinsky, which is annoying.
Yeah, I noticed that Lewinsky constantly jokes about it on Twitter.
I do see that she's very humorous. when she talks to things, talks about the nature of those things. So I'm really interested in seeing it, just to see, like if there's any information that is new that I don't know about.
Mm-hmm. You can also watch Mr. Personality, which was a reality show that Lewinsky hosted.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. About what? Like, what was it about?
It's a dating reality show. It's like kind of like the Bachelorette type thing, except everyone is wearing like masks and stuff, so that she won't judge you off your looks. It'll be off your personality. So that's why it's called Mr. Personality.
So was she the one that was looking for somebody, or what?
No, she was the host.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, that's funny.
So during the Clinton administration, several cabinet-level Mexican Americans served under President Bill Clinton. So these included Henry Cisneros of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, who I did watch give a keynote speech in when he did it in UT Arlington at Texas Hall, which was very interesting. I don't remember anything from it.
But it was interesting.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. I know that he was also the mayor of San Antonio for a while, and he was in charge of like a bunch of things that we have now, like the River Center. And I believe he also helped with the Alamo Dome. All those kinds of things. Federico Peña is another one. He was in the Department of Transportation and the Department of Energy. Bill Richardson, who was the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and Department of Energy. So Clinton was widely praised for his overall cabinet selections, which were significantly more diverse than prior administrations. So let's give a look. Let's look at him and his cabinet members. All right, so let me just do that.
All right.
All right, here they are.
So it looks like we have Clinton and his cabinet on the steps of, I guess, the White House.
Yeah, it looks like the Rose Garden, yeah.
Or the Rose Garden, sorry. And
the Rose Garden's in the White House, so you're still right.
Okay. I've never been to Washington, D.C., just for the record.
I've been to Washington, D.C., but I've only looked at the White House, like, from afar.
Is that the only way? Oh, well, you can actually do tours, right?
You can do tours, yeah. I know they stopped doing tours during the pandemic, but they might be starting it up again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd love to go one of these days, but yeah, I've not gone yet.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a picture of Clinton and his cabinet, and it looks like he has more women too than men in his cabinet.
Mm.
We know Slick Willie loved them women.
Oh my goodness, Ruby.
Some women.
Oh, you said that, not me. So comments, direct your complaints to Ruby.
It's a joke, guys.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, he has about, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Like, what about it, 20 something? About 20, 23, 25 cabinet members, and they're all Latino.
Mm-hmm.
In this picture.
Yep. Pretty good.
Pretty good, yeah. We're getting somewhere.
Mm-hmm. So what do you say? Clinton, best president?
Oh, no, I'm not going to say that.
Okay.
I don't want any hate comments.
Okay. So, yeah. So during his presidency, however, Clinton's legacy with both Mexico and the Mexican-American community was more mixed. His passage of His passage of the 1994 crime bill is recognized as disproportionately targeting and incarcerating young Mexican American and African American men. Further, his policy of pushing Washington's consensus policies on Mexico led to the 1994 Mexican peso crisis. Yep. Which was a currency sparked by the Mexican government's sudden devaluation of the peso against the U.S. dollar in December 1994, which became one of the first international financial crises ignited by capital flight, which also decimated the Mexican working class and increased the migration into the United States. So, we hurt ourselves in the confusion.
Right.
Boom.
It sounds like that, and it sounds like even though they try so hard, or there are effects, things that affect the Latino community, it seems like the end result is always more migration into the U.S.
Mm-hmm. All right, so finally, his signing of the NAFTA is recognized for its harmful effect on both the nation's working classes and the expansion of maquiladoras in states like Baja California, Chihuahua, and Coahuila. Maquiladoras, what are they, you ask? It's a company that allows factories to be largely duty-free and tariff-free. So, in the 1990s, Chicano youth gang involvement continued to rise across the country as a result of both the expansion of cocaine markets and widespread socioeconomic changes in the U.S. So, manufacturing jobs have been decreasing across the U.S. for 20 years, and as the American economy turned toward the technological and service industries, unemployment rates among young men of color soared in urban areas. Unable to find work in this changing economy, drug markets became the only source of survival for these displaced workers, as the rising price of crack cocaine became the only way for desperate youth to make money. So what do you think about that?
I think that our leaders today should study this history. Maybe they have, and they just don't want to realize it or put in the work, because it would take money and a lot of changes for them to actually attack, or I guess I don't want to say attack, but solve the problems that lead to drug trafficking and gangs. Mm-hmm. Because as we see here, the result of it is actually, poverty, being mm-hmm. without jobs, and all of the things that they place as barriers yep. For attaining jobs.
So what you're saying is we should get more police.
That's what they hear.
And we should, punch them in the face.
That's exactly what our elected officials. We need more police. Yes, because that has helped, stop crime and drug trafficking and gangs. That has stopped it, all these years.
Yeah, we gotta lock them up. Definitely sounds a lot easier than whatever it is you said.
Yeah, that's a lot easier than actually taking a small percentage of police budget, mm-hmm. which we would take it from their budget because they're the ones that are in public safety, yep. right? This would be connected to public safety. And again, defunding the police does not mean we are going to take completely all of their funds. I want everybody to, be aware of what that actually means. It's taking just a small percentage from their funds and actually putting it towards things that will solve public safety issues by investing that money in communities.
Right.
So that's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean we're not going to have cops. It doesn't mean that there's going to be chaos and anarchy and more crime, because that's what some of the elected officials want you to believe, because they want you to be against that.
Mm-hmm. So over time, however, drug markets were monopolized by organized gangs, which actively recruited increasingly younger African American and Chicano youth. Traditional American pathways away from a gangster lifestyle such as marriage, family, and stable employment were largely unavailable to these youths. And in many Black, Chicano, and immigrant communities, gang violence emerged as a dominant informal control and socialization force. So, Chicano youth gang activity in the 1990s rose notably in Los Angeles and Chicago, two of the cities with the nation's highest numbers of Mexican Americans. But gang activity rose in almost every U.S. city, including throughout Texas. The political response to gangs such as the Mexican Mafia and the 38th Street was a dramatic escalation of the Reagan administration's war on drugs. Racialized fears of Black and brown super predators resulted on tough on crime policies in the 1990s culminating in the infamous Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994. The law provided local funding to hire over 100,000 new police officers, created grant programs to incentivize drug-related arrests, gave states funds to build massive new prison facilities, and disproportionately criminalized crack cocaine over regular cocaine. And some have argued this bill led directly to the U.S.'s rise of mass incarceration. What are your thoughts?
That sounds about right. And again, we have that, good old punch it in the face approach. And that also, that approach where they're just reacting to a problem, they're not actually solving the root cause of the problem. And that's the issue. All of these police officers, no matter how many police officers you hire, they're not going to be there every single time. They're not going to be, actually, how do I say, they're not going to be involved in all of those people's lives to be able to get them to change their ways. They're just going to be there to respond to the criminal activity.
So do you think
that's not going to help?
Yeah. So do you think that it's a privilege to feel safe around police?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of people don't realize that it is an absolute privilege to feel safe around police, because I know several people that do not feel safe around police. I don't feel safe around police at all. And I'm, just a regular person. I don't go out and break the laws or anything like that, but I still don't feel safe around them.
So the ramifications of police militarization was extremely severe, particularly in cities like Los Angeles. In the late 1980s, LAPD had responded to gang violence with a series of extremely violent community raids, including Operation Hammer, which was organized under the Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums. In the 1990s, as many as 2,000 people a year were killed in Los Angeles County due to gang violence. In September 1993, a mass meeting in Elysian Park, organized by LAERM, is that right? LAERM? It's the Mexican Mafia. So, was called to put an end to violence between Mexicans. However, such truces were not usually long-lasting. So after the passage of the 1994 crime bill, the LAPD responded by ramping up its anti-gang tactics, including home and apartment raids, street sweeps, and civil gang injunctions. So, there goes that.
I like what they were trying to do, but again, when you have money and control and people who are power hungry, peace can only last so long. I know that sometimes we have gangs coming together when there are, protests for social injustices that happen. But again, I don't know how long that lasts, because those, the environments that they're in, as far as like the gang environment, it's basically bred off of violence, to begin with.
So
unfortunately.
So in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the Service Employee International Union initiated a series of Justice for Janitors campaign to unionize U.S. janitors. At a march in Los Angeles on June 15th, 1990, the striking janitors, many of whom were undocumented Mexican and Central American immigrants, were attacked by the Los Angeles Police Department. So the police at first claimed they were acting in self-defense, but TV footage aired later showed the police violently beating unarmed and peaceful strikers. 60 strikers were jailed, 38 were hospitalized, and 2 women miscarried. What are your thoughts?
There goes the good old LAPD.
You muted yourself.
Oh, sorry. I said there goes the good old LAPD doing their dirt again and trying to lie about it.
Mm-hmm. So here's a photo of said strike, of the Justice for Janitors strike, on June 15th, 1990. Okay.
Oh my God.
So what are we seeing here?
So we see a Hispanic male.
Mm-hmm.
He is wearing a Justice for Janitors shirt, so obviously he's one of the protesters.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have two LAPD officers in their uniforms and riot gear beating this man, both of them. One of the policemen's baton going at his face, at the man's face, and the other policeman's baton striking his arm on the other side. So they're like both attacking this man.
Mm-hmm. And then in the background, it's just more of the same.
And then in the background, there's just more protesters and more of the police officers being violent with the protesters.
So how does this photo make you feel?
Like it's very, how do I say, disturbing. It's like when you first pull it up, it's just like, I don't see the cause for. I mean, he's unarmed. He's definitely, like, you can see he's unarmed, and they're just, being so aggressive and beating this man. So it makes me, it's disturbing, but at the same time, it kind of like, this is something that we've seen nowadays. Anytime that there's been protests with any kind of social injustice happening, the police come and they are told, I guess, to wild out on the protesters. And we saw so many videos, and I'm so glad that now we have, video capabilities. We have recording capabilities, and we can just, do it with our phones now. Because we saw so many of the peaceful protesting that was going on, and then the police officers would just come and start pepper spraying people or shooting tear gas at them and things like that. And it's like, we have a right to protest. It's literally in the Constitution.
Kind of reminds you a lot of the BLM protests last summer.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that I was thinking of. But back then, whenever it was the colonizers, I guess I'm going to call them, protesting against British rule and British taxation, they didn't seem to think that that was bad.
Well, they did dress up as Native Americans.
What do you mean?
Remember the Boston Tea Party, which was one of the biggest protests of the time? They dressed up as Native Americans and snuck onto a ship.
That was an action. That wasn't really a protest. That was an action that they did, and it wasn't many of them. But I'm saying when they began actually coming together and forming protests, whenever British would send their officials over to collect taxes, they used to all gang up on the tax collector. They used to sometimes even threaten them, and then they started with the whole marching against the British officials, and they clashed with the British officials whenever England wanted to drive them away by force, bringing their army into the colonies and trying to get them to behave that way. They didn't see anything wrong with it then.
Right.
They were all for protesting then. Also, like you said, the Boston Tea Party, they were all for destroying property then.
And dressing up as a minority.
And dressing up as somebody else, so it's like, whenever I hear people talk about, oh, that's not right, and that, it's like, this is literally the history of America. This is where it started to begin with.
Then there was that whole...
And we've done nothing but learn from the Founding Fathers and how they acted towards England.
And also, yeah, and there was that whole Boston massacre thing, where that was that protest in Boston, and then the British just like killed a bunch of people in
Right, and
retaliation.
they were tried. They were tried for that.
Hmm.
The British soldiers were tried in a court for
I
that, and they were found guilty.
I think the whole thing was that they were going to be tried in England, and a lot of people didn't like that. They wanted them to be tried in America or in the colonies. But yeah, that's a whole another can of worms. So let's move on.
Move on.
Uh, so let's move on. Okay, so one striker told reporters, this is still about the Justice for Janitors strike, that what they did to us today in front of the TV cameras is the way the police treat us every day. And another woman stated, I wasn't robbing a bank or selling drugs. I'm simply asking for an increase in pay, but the police beat us as if we were garbage.
And this is where the fear of police, stems from.
Mm-hmm. So public outrage followed coverage of the event, and the janitors won the union, which doubled their pay and earned them benefits. The strike also inspired janitors in other parts of the country, including Houston, where jailed strikers were held on $20 million bail for civil disobedience. That's a lot of moolah.
That is a high ass bail. And you know what? I bet that there are rapists and child molesters and other ugly people that are much deserving of a high ass bail who don't even have a high ass bail like that.
Mm-hmm. So, outrage over the incident in Houston was global, with workers across the U.S. striking in support, and allies in Europe occupying buildings in protest. The Houston strike was successful and pushed a pension fund trustees to develop reasonable contractor procedures. The 2000 film Bread and Roses was based on the Los Angeles campaign, so check that out. Have you checked that out?
No, I'm definitely going to check that out, though.
Yeah, check out Bread and Roses by Ken Loach.
Did you say bread or red?
Bread, like what you eat.
Bread, okay. I have put red in roses for some reason. I don't know why. Bread and roses.
Yeah, Bread and Roses. In the mid-1990s, the industrial workers of the world also sought to organize Mexican workers, including troqueros and taxi drivers in Los Angeles. For those of you who don't know, troqueros is just another word for truck drivers. So, all right, so we're going to go on to 1992, the 1992 Los Angeles uprising, which was an uprising against police brutality that occurred in Los Angeles County in April and May 1992. The unrest began in South Central Los Angeles on April 29th after a trial jury acquitted 4 officers of the Los Angeles Police Department for usage of excessive force and arrest and beating of Rodney King, which had been videotaped and widely viewed on TV broadcasts. Though much of the media coverage surrounding the events focused on constructing either a black versus white or a black versus Asian narrative due to the tensions caused by the murder of Letitia Harlins. So the majority of people arrested during the uprising were Latino. Analysis of the charges of the riot's peak days showed 51% defendants were Latino and 36% were black. And if of the 58 total people killed during the riots, more than 1/3 were Latino. And this is according to the Los Angeles Times and the New York Times. So, Stanford.
Do you feel like that? Do you feel like the reason there was more Latinos than there were blacks involved in that situation, being that it was a black man who was the one that was beaten? Do you think it is related to, I guess, something psychological from the past of them being, afraid to go against the law or against, policemen in general, black people? Do you think that has anything to do with that?
Probably.
I'm just thinking out loud.
Uh,
Because I feel like maybe maybe the Latinos were like, we don't give a fuck.
okay.
We've been about this life. We've been about fighting,
Okay.
for ourselves. And I mean, I feel like there's damage done to both communities.
We gotta look out for each other, Ruby.
But we really do.
So, Stanford University professor Joan Patricia stated about the uprising. This is what she had to say. This was clearly not a black riot. It was a minority riot. So the majority of Latino residents in South Central Los Angeles in the early 1990s were recent Mexican immigrants and Central Americans. As a result, when the city's Latino leadership met during the uprising to discuss resolution strategies, the disconnect between LA's Mexican American established and South LA's recent migrant community was more fully understood. So Los Angeles County's only Latino supervisor, Gloria Molina, told the New York Times that in the days when the Los Angeles was burning, she received multiple calls from Mexican American constituents urging her to denounce South Central's Mexican population. Molina stated they would say, well, Gloria, it wasn't us doing the looting and the burning. It was those immigrants. Molina went further and stated, they wanted me to denounce them, but I say, let's not let that divide us. So even white...
Good on ya.
So even white journalists, such as the Los Angeles Times reporter Jack Miles, noted the tension between South and East LA Latino communities. He wrote, the law-abiding Mexican-American community of East Los Angeles resented being associated with the Latinos of South Los Angeles, and that the incident marked the beginning of a Mexican-American anti-immigrant stance. And this is where we get like the Latinos for Trump type people.
I was gonna say this is something that I recently read about. Is the whole like nationalism brainwashing type of thing that goes on in America.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in the years,
that's where they've been. I mean, like because all this time they've been shoving down our throats. USA is the best country. Like absolutely. We do nothing wrong. We are the best because we are a democracy, and they don't want any faults. They don't want to. How do I say? Admit any flaws.
Mm-hmm.
So then people think that that's true.
So in the years after the uprising, some journalists focused on the long-term interracial scars left by the racial uprising, while others focused on multiple intra-ethnic meanings, such as the uprising held for Latino communities in Los Angeles. Historians have also explained some of the reasons why there was so much Latino participation, including the brutality that Latinos also experienced for the LAPD, the near constant threat of deportation, and the neoliberal defunding of inner-city municipal services. So that's why they think there were more Latinos there.
So again, we were fighting, for our rights as well.
Mm-hmm.
We were fighting for minority rights.
Right. So Proposition 187, also known as Save Our State Initiative, was a 1994 ballot initiative to establish a state-run citizenship screening system and prohibit undocumented immigrants from using non-emergency health care, public shooting, and other short services in the state of California. So the bill was widely opposed by the state's Latino community, though the Mexican Americans did express support for the measure. Well, some of them did. In the lead up to the November vote, there were widespread No on 184 protests throughout California, as activists urged that a full denial of basic rights to undocumented people would be detrimental to the state. In October 1994, an estimated 70,000 people marched in Los Angeles to protest Prop 187. In one of the largest protests in U.S. history, the political atmosphere in California at the time, however, was extremely xenophobic. And coverage of the protests focused on a large number of Latino, Mexican, and Mexican American participants, and especially expressed outrage at the presence of Mexican flags at the protests. What do you think of that?
I think that is expected and not surprising at all. But yet, these are probably the same people who flew Trump 2020 flags and Confederate flags and Nazi flags. Like,
makes you think that they might be hypocritical.
God forbid we, show some of our culture, some of where we come from,
Yep. Yeah, and then they also say, I wear the Confederate flag because it's my heritage. And then it's like, well, I'm doing the same thing. No! It needs to be the American flag and only that.
Yeah. Pretty much.
So Proposition 187 passed with an 58% of the vote. Shortly after the proposition's passage, U.S. District Court Judge Mariana R. Feitzler in Los Angeles ruled that preventing undocumented children from attending K-12 schools was unconstitutional and prevented the implementation of most of the measure's other provisions. So hooray! Prop 187 was overturned.
Good, because we had enough people fighting against it.
So Proposition 187, though overturned, significantly eroded Mexican American and Latino support for the California Republican Party. That's kind of like why we shifted from Republican to Democrat. In many ways, however, its basic tenets shaped the future of American debates regarding the rights of undocumented people in the U.S. Culturally, the measure had also had a strong impact on the community. In Solenidad, the poet Deborah Paredes connected the collective trauma of the 1995 death of Selena to the community's response to the measure's initial passage. Writing, Selena's death galvanized Latino efforts and to publicly mourn collective tragedies, such as approved anti-Latino legislation in California, Prop 187 and Proposition 229, and to envision a brighter future.
Wow. That's so, I guess I'm trying to find the word. Her legacy, that she left behind. If it got people to come together, that's such a huge thing.
Selena's?
Yeah. So it's so tragic, that she died so soon in her life. And I think about this all the time. I think about what kind of music, she would have out right now. And, she was already moving towards the English market. And so it sucks that we'll never get to hear that. But I'm glad that she can at least leave behind a legacy of bringing her people together and bringing Latinos together.
If you want to learn more about the murder of Selena, check out my true crime podcast. I did a 2-part episode of the event. You can check it out right up there.
Yeah, we're talking about Selena Quintanilla.
Selena Quintanilla, not any other one that you're thinking of. Selena Gomez is not Selena Gomez because she's still alive.
Right.
Yep, and if you also want to check out to hear more of that, there's also a film that came out in 1997 where Jennifer Lopez played Selena, and it was directed by Gregory Nava. You can check that out. You can watch it on HBO Max if you have it. You can also check out the Netflix show. Yeah, you can watch the Netflix show. That's on. It's on Netflix. Where who plays it? Christian Serratos plays Selena, and it was made by Moises Zamora. So you can check that out on Netflix. There was also some other Spanish-speaking ones that are covered that you can find on Telemundo and Univision, that kind of thing. But yeah, those are everything you need to know about Selena depicted on film. So now we're done with the 90s. The 90s are done. Now we're going to go to the early 2000s.
Great. And I have some information about the early 2000s in Mexico.
In Mexico.
The country of Mexico, because like we want to give the whole 360, right? So we'll get some information about Mexico as well as, Mexicans in America.
If you must. All right, let's hear it.
Just so we get the whole view, right?
Uh-huh. What do you got for us?
So we have the first, I guess, opposition of the PRI rule. Remember, the PRI was that corrupt party that ruled Mexico for several years. So we have Vicente Fox, who wins the Mexican presidency and in the year 2000, which ends more than 70 years of PRI rule. So an interesting thing was that Fox was a former Coca-Cola executive. And you guys, if you don't know by now, Mexicans love Coca-Cola.
I do love Coca-Cola.
But he enters in as a conservative reformer, focused on improving trade relations with the U.S., calming civil unrest, and also reducing corruption, crime, and drug trafficking. He also strives to improve the status of millions of illegal Mexican immigrants living in the U.S., but his efforts are stalled after the terrorist attacks of 9/11. Fox is also faced with large-scale protests by farmers frustrated with the inequalities of that good old NAFTA system that Bill Clinton put in place. Yeah, so that's the early 2000s in Mexico.
All right. Well, let's go to USA in the early 2000s. The consensus showed that the foreign-born population in the U.S. increased by 11.3 million people in the 1990s. And Mexican immigrants accounted for 43% of that growth. The region which had the fastest-growing immigrant population was the Southeast, where Mexicans found work in construction as migrant agricultural laborers and in textile mills and chicken processing plants. So the Latino populations of Georgia, North and South Carolina, and Arkansas increased between 300 and 400% from 1990 to 2000.
Wow, that is huge. Huge number.
So a major focus of Chicano activists in the 21st century has been to advance the presentation of Chicanos in all American mainstream media. Criticism of the American mainstream news media and U.S. educational institutions by Chicano activists have been particularly harsh in recent years, subsequent to the massive displays of support for immigrant rights, such as that seen during the Great March in March 25th, 2006 in Los Angeles. As of today, this self-proclaimed largest march in U.S. history was primarily organized by Mexican-American organizations, Chicano activists, and fueled through a large network of active internet users. LA Spanish-language television and Spanish-language news radio coverage is still virtually ignored by American mainstream, which, when they say that, they mean English-language news media, and all textbooks of the American educational system. What do you think?
I think that it's a good thing that they're actually acknowledging, that we have more Spanish speakers in the U.S., so they're kind of trying to accommodate that.
Now, have you noticed that in the 2000s, in the early 2000s, the lack of Mexican American history in history textbooks?
I feel like they've added a bit more than there was before. I certainly see that we have more representation as far as being, in commercials and TV shows and movies and things like that, and some of our, great stories being told, where some of our unsung heroes are being talked about. So I'm glad to see that.
Now, I remember I went to school during the early 2000s, and I remember the Latino history was being virtually non-existent in the
Yeah.
textbooks.
Yeah, I see it more now, but back then I really don't remember, if anything. I feel like it was more so, about the colonies, learning about the colonies, learning about the government, learning about slavery and their rights. I hardly saw anything, about Mexican Americans,
Yeah.
Chicanos, and things like that.
And the civil rights movement, but only particularly towards African American civil rights, not so much the Latino
Right.
or the LGBTQ aspects of it, or the women aspect of it.
Right. All of my learning of our history and our unsung heroes was outside of school,
Hmm.
mainly. Or if it was like a project that was like given to us. Even like in my Spanish class, we didn't really go into the history. There was more so just the teaching of the language. And at that, it was like a singular type of language. Like it wasn't even some of the words that they used were from the European Spanish,
Hmm.
not Mexico Spanish.
You mean Latin
So there was
Spanish?
there was like a huge disconnect there, and it was hard for even myself, who grew up hearing Spanish and talking Spanish, to pass that class, because it was just like, wait, what? We don't say that.
Because you were learning a different dialect?
Yeah. So yeah.
Like, basically in those days, it was just Cinco de Mayo, and that's it.
Cinco de Mayo, let's go get drunk. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
have us some margaritas.
And it wasn't until maybe a couple years later, in the later years of the decade, they finally decided to include the Mexican Independence Day. But
Yeah, I still don't see a lot of that.
Hmm.
The Mexican Independence Day is only celebrated by those who know of it.
Yeah. And then, we don't see this until the 2010s, when people started finally acknowledging Hispanic Heritage Month and all that kind of stuff. So, all right, so we're talking about the 2000s.
My son's school, sorry to interrupt, but my son's school is celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month.
Yeah.
They have when he logs in, he's like, it's Hispanic Heritage Month and stuff like that. I never saw anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, me neither. All right, so a major focus of the 21st century. Yeah. Yeah, so after the increase of border security following the 9/11 attacks in 2001, the back and forth pattern became dangerous. People kept coming north, but they stayed in the U.S. and sent money home every month. Locked into the American economy year-round, millions of these undocumented workers moved out of seasoned agricultural jobs into year-round jobs in restaurants, hotels, construction, landscaping, and semi-skilled factory work, such as meat packaging. Most paid federal Social Security taxes into imaginary accounts and thus were not eligible for benefits. Few had high enough incomes to pay federal and state income tax, but all paid local and state sales taxes on their purchases, as well as local property taxes via their rent payments to landlords and stuff like that. So by 2007, there were 12 million or so undocumented workers in the U.S. Antonio?
It's so hard for them because they still have to pay everything that normal citizens have to pay, but then at the same time they don't get any of the benefits.
Yeah, all the tasks and none of the reward. 2005, Antonio Villaraigosa was elected mayor of Los Angeles, the first Latino in 130 years to hold the seat. Eric Garcetti became the second consecutive Mexican-American mayor. So Mexican Americans tend to vote Democratic. In 1960, the John F. Kennedy presidential campaign boosted the Mexican American vote to over 80% for Kennedy. However, Mexican Americans in recent decades had a low turnout on Election Day. In 1984, 37% of Latino Americans voted for Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush, targeted Latinos, and won 35% of their votes in 2000 and 40% in 2004. And the fact that his brother Jeb Bush married to a Mexican woman, Columba Bush, so voters have elected a number of governors to a Mexican descent in the Southwest, which include Ezequiel Cabeza de Vaca, Octavio Ambrosio, Lorazolo, Jerry Apodaca, Tony Anaya, Bill Richardson, and Raul Hector Castro in Arizona. So what do you think about that whole voter turnout thing?
I think it's about a lot of this. There's a disconnect. There's a disconnect where people were taught how the government works and them just thinking that their vote does not count, because it absolutely does. They would like for you to think that it doesn't count, because they know that you would most likely vote the minorities will most likely vote Democratic, and the Republican Party, as always, has always wanted to be the one to win, and they will do whatever they can to make sure that they win.
And you also fell into that mindset as well.
Yes. So I know for a fact that that's what it is, because I had that mindset myself. Not until recently, when I started relearning on my own how things work and why things work the way that they do, did I realize the importance of my vote. And also just because I didn't want to be one of those to just sit back and say, oh, well, it's out of my hands, and then complain about what the end result was, because I at least felt like I took an action and I did my part. And everybody here that lives in America should know that if you're a citizen of the United States, it is absolutely your civic duty to participate in democracy, because that's literally what a democracy is. It's for the people, by the people, us being the people.
Yes. And so, like, you also worked in 2020, during Election Day in 2020, contacting Mexican American families. What did you think about that? Tell me your experience.
I saw so many. Like we did a campaign with my organization called TOP. It's the Texas Organizing Project, and we worked on getting people to we were like sending text messages, basically. All of us, we were sending text messages and asking them, if they were going to vote and things like that. And I saw a lot of responses that were very ugly, very nasty, very rude, and most of them came from Hispanics, Latinos. So I do know that there are those Latinos who, I guess, I don't know, for whatever reason, hate themselves, hate their heritage, hate their ancestors, and they want to be, white so bad, like they want to be Caucasian so bad or something, that they want to just completely side with them, and they don't care about the repercussions, because it's like you can want to be, somebody else as bad as you want, but at the end of the day, you're still going to be you, and they're still going to treat you like a minority.
So what is an example of the messages that you would get that were bad?
Well, they'd be like, I don't, y'all are dumb, like, Trump 2020, I don't even know why you're bothering me, or just dumb stuff, like, just, ignorant stuff.
And I bet they didn't even vote for Trump, but I don't think they voted at all.
I don't know, and that's the thing. Like, some of them were just saying it just to say it, just because they want to be ugly and mean and stuff like that. And it's like, we're literally reaching out because we're trying to show you how important it is for you to vote, regardless of who you vote for. it's still important for you to vote because that's where you live. You chose to live here in the United States, or you are living here in the United States, and unfortunately, that's one of the things that you have to participate in is in the government because that's how it's set up. We don't live in a fascist, country where everything is decided for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally what the founding fathers, fought for.
Despite what the GOP wants you to believe, they want you to believe that the Democrats are the fascist people. Because they want you to wear masks all the time, and they want you to get vaccinated.
How dare they try to save your life?
So, also, let me think. There's a Mexican slang for people like that called pochos.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
It's called pocho, and it basically means fake Mexican. So it basically means a Mexican who doesn't want anything to do with their Mexican heritage.
Yeah, I know a lot of those.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, I get it, but at the end of the day, like I said, you still are who you are, and they're gonna treat you that way. No matter how much you do for them, it's not going to take much for them to turn around and basically stab you in the back whenever they need to or feel that it's necessary because that's what you are to them. You're a minority.
So let's talk about Cruz Bustamante, who was the first Democratic Lieutenant Governor of California in 130 years from his election in 1999 to 2007. But Bustamante lost the gubernatorial election to Austrian-born actor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who went on to be state governor. So, what do you think about that, Ruby?
Did Bustamante have prior experience in office?
He was lieutenant governor for like 8 years.
So we literally chose the Terminator, or they literally chose the Terminator over this dude that had lots of experience.
But you said you were a fan of Schwarzenegger's governor.
No, I said it actually turned out to be okay.
Oh yeah.
I was surprised that it turned out to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think about it, and you have this dude that has all these years of experience versus this dude that has none, and he's just an actor.
Yeah, I think Schwarzenegger ran as a Republican. Let me see.
Did he?
Yeah, he was Republican.
Wow. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, but don't worry. You said he was okay. He was a decent Republican.
Yeah, but who knows how much better the Democratic Latino would have been,
Mm-hmm. And I know that he has since called people who refuse to wear masks dumbos and dummies.
Yeah, I guess he's kind of one of those nice Republicans. He's not so conservative.
He's what the GOP calls a rhino.
A rhino.
A rhino. A Republican in name only.
Okay. Maybe he did do that. Maybe he was playing, their game, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to run as Republican only because I know that that's what the people would vote for, but I'm going to act Democratic the whole way.
Oh, snap. He's playing the system, trying to get the system on the inside. So, moving on, we're going to go into the tale of Romualdo Pacheco. Romualdo Pacheco, who served as the 12th governor of California and remains the only Latino governor in the state's history as part of the United States. So yeah, that's basically it. Now it's I know that California is very, very Democratic, and they currently have a Democratic governor, Gavin Newsom, who I remember there was this huge scare that happened. There was some kind of thing that happened where the GOP wanted a recount or a recampaign or something.
Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah, so so they can get a Republican into the governor office of California.
It's funny how it's only cheating and they only need a recount whenever it's them that lose.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
But when they win, they're like, no recount, no.
Yeah. And their districts are heavily gerrymandered.
Yeah, and it's like I don't want anybody to, watch this and say, "Oh, they're so leftist on this podcast or they're so democratic on this podcast." I am not a party affiliated person, first of all. I only have my interest of the good of the people.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happens that the Democratic Party is more aligned towards that than the Republican.
Yeah, and you just said that Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is a Republican, was actually not a bad governor.
Exactly. So that just goes to show you, I'm not party aligned. I'm not a, what do they call it?
You said party loyalist once.
Yeah, there you go. I'm not loyal to any party. I'm actually loyal to our communities and to the people of the country. So the best. I want the best for everyone here, including you Trump supporters. Y'all don't know it, but we want health care for you. We want free health care for you. We want
free education,
free
please.
education for you, especially free education. Good Lord.
I don't want to be in debt till I'm 1,000,000 years old.
Yeah, exactly. And don't believe that, everyone can become a millionaire, because not the way they have it set up. They want only those people that are millionaires to stay millionaires while the rest of us stay poor.
So yeah, that's where we'll end today's podcast. We covered the 90s and the early 2000s. What is your overall opinion on these two decades?
I guess one of the main points that I've actually seen across all the decades, and something that still plagues us today even, is that brute force of policing. Like, if you listen to all of our podcasts, all of these episodes, that's one thing that you will see constant, is that since the beginning of policing, it's been brutality. They've been using their power abusively.
Right.
And it's not okay. And that needs to change. That's one of the things that I have not seen change. Everything else, we've seen progressing slowly but surely, except for that.
Right. So in the next episode, which will most likely be our final episode regarding Mexicans in America, where we'll talk about the 2010s, where we'll focus on the Obama era and the Trump administration. Yeah.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the immigration policies during the Obama era, the LGBTQ legalization of same-sex marriage in 2015. We're going to talk about the Trump protests in 2016, the 2019 El Paso shooting, and then we're also going to talk about, we're going to also go into the 2020s, where we're going to talk about the BLM protests and the COVID-19 pandemic, and we can't go any further than that. We can't really go into the future.
I hope we also talk about how badly Obama was bullied, for winning that presidency when he did, because geez, that brought out some of the worst in people, and I thought that was the worst in people, but then the Trump administration came out, and then I was proven wrong, because there was even worse things that people were just itching to say. So.
Yeah, so that's what we'll talk about next time. All right, did you have a good time this time around, the second time we're doing this?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us in this spooky history, scary history for Latinos.
Yeah. Be careful on Halloween, because Halloween can be pretty dangerous sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. You guys be safe out there, but enjoy Halloween. And we will catch you on the hopefully last episode and then we can get into the other cultures, like Native Americans.
Yeah, Ruby really wants to talk
African
about the Native Americans.
all of that. Yeah, so that'll be some definitely interesting stuff.
Yep. All right, we'll talk to you guys next time. I've been Nathaniel Abiwa.
And I've been Ruby Rodriguez.
All right, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening to a Vision podcast, home of wacky talkies, The Kingdom, Evil Exists, and many more.